is really good to be with you this morning. First, I bring you greetings from Karen Pittman, who was with you last year, and I have the real privilege of being able to work with Karen every day, and she considers this work that we'll be talking about her life work, and I would say I consider it the same. We see it answering so many of the questions that have not been answered in what we've been able to do previously. And lastly, in terms of the audience and what Kate shared, today is my son's 5th birthday. And in the sessions, the breakout sessions, you'll get to see a picture of this cute little redhead. And I'm especially excited to be with you. I said yes on his birthday because I'm a sober mom. And because as a young person, a school-based substance abuse counselor reached out and connected with me and gave me choice and gave me freedom for a life that I never thought that I would get. And so my son has never had to see me use. And so of course, I would come and share this with you because this work has transformed me personally as a mama, as a sober mama, and also professionally as someone who has worked with young people who are just really struggling. So for the next 15 minutes, I'm going to take you on a quick tour just to pique your interest on what we've been up to for the last several years. So I have the privilege as a senior fellow of the Forum for being able to run a project called the Readiness Project. I do that for half of my time. And the reason, so I'm going to have to look at this screen, I think, more than over here. So I'm sorry if you don't see my eyeballs too much. So the reason why I came to the Forum was that I was running a school in St. Louis, Missouri for 17 to 21-year-olds, disconnected youth, what folks are now calling opportunity youth, who wanted to come back to school, but they had dropped out or been pushed out because life had gotten too hard. And so we were the only school in the state of Missouri to have a waiver from what's called seat time. We were allowed to push young people forward or let them progress based on what they could show us they knew and what they could do rather than the time that they had spent in class. And for young people who we work with, that's really very important. We had lots of community partners, including folks who were working on prevention and substance abuse work. We had lots of resources, and we were the only school in Missouri's history to close ourselves, which was hard and the right thing to do. And the reason why was because our young people were dancing in and out of all of the settings and systems that you see. And in spite of tremendous work, loving relationships, and committed and smart people who were partnering in their best interest to get them to graduate, to get them sober, to get them out of jail, we actually could not get them ready in time. And so here were all of these young people attached to, by the time that they were with us, many services, many systems, and we couldn't get them ready for adulthood. And a part of the reason why was because as a school, we had requirements. We had curriculum and content requirements, and we had no idea where to start. And so in our school, in our organization, we had to meet all of those requirements of our system, which was education. And then all that was left was just keeping them alive. STDs programming, emergency housing, crisis care, rather than a generative and proactive approach to focusing on the skills and the habits and the attitudes that matter the most. And so when we closed, my boss, who some of you met last year, called me and said, "What did you learn?" And I said, there's got to be more to getting young people ready than what we were told it meant to get young people ready. And she said, there has to be more, but we hadn't gotten precise about it. And so the Readiness Project was born to get precise about what really matters the most, no matter what system or setting a young person is in, and what can be developed in any system or setting where they are spending time. So what we know is that there are some tremendous difficulties that particular groups of young people face. And systems perpetuate some of these difficulties. And there have been lots of efforts to address the various gaps that young people face. The achievement gap, the skills gap, the opportunity gap. But focusing just on what's wrong and broken is beneficial but wholly insufficient. And there are things that systems do inadvertently in their culture and their policies that actually make those gaps even worse. So for our purposes today, I'll just give you one. When we use completion as a proxy for competence. If you complete this program, if you go through this six-week session, if you finish this number of community service hours, then you are a success in our indicators, outcomes, and you push us closer to our goals. But have we equipped the young person with what they need to stay sober, to continue their education, for autonomy and identity in the ways that they need? And I would say no. So there are 4 traps that we can scrub out our systems for that perpetuate these gaps, that make it even harder for young people, especially our Black and brown young people, our rural and urban kiddos, our poor kiddos, who experience many, if not all of those gaps all at one time, and who are in systems that have most of those traps in really intense ways. So we've taken 3 years to look at what every single one of those systems says is really important. What do the pediatricians look for? What do the prevention folks look for? What do the educators look for? What do the workforce development people, the JJ people, what do they all know is important? What are their indicators of success or of thriving or of well-being? And then what does science say? How do our brains work? How do we actually learn? How do we develop? How do we overcome struggle? And what does culture say? Because even if the science supports it and the sectors support it, if culture's endorsing something that's unhealthy, you still have to be ready for it. Like working really hard and multitasking, and how are you going to organize your time with lots of competing demands and not very family-friendly social policy? So we took the time to look at the sectors and what they said, all of those frameworks, all of those lists of standards and settings, over 200. We chose 66, and we crosswalked them all to see where the overlap was. What did folks agree was most important? And then, like Bible translators, we tried to get it into language that was not sector specific, put it in language that young people and their families and the other adults who care for them could understand. And what we found, which is so exciting and that you'll learn more later, let me check my time, see I really like this stuff, is that just like we have body systems, you know, our respiratory system, cardiovascular, all of that, and we'll dig in more, there's another set of systems at work that we can name and that we can develop and that we can track and we can measure. And they have to work together, and we'll see them in a moment. But we use those systems at times when we're struggling, and they're the same things we use when we're working to get better and when we're thriving. And they can be intentionally strengthened. And in well-resourced areas, they're often strengthened and taught and nurtured without us naming them. It's an invisible thing. But in under-resourced areas or with populations that struggle, if we start to get specific about naming them, or if we give the young people agency to know what they need, then we have a new way to map how and where they spend their time so that they can actually be in places and with people who are developing those things that will matter the most, that actually matter more than some of our system outcomes. And so the key leveraging space to move young people from struggling to thriving is this readiness thing, this mucky middle that we're trying to make less mucky. And we're real precise about what risk and struggle looks like. And we're real precise about what well-being and thriving and success looks like. And why I'm here today is to tell you that the civil rights piece, the equity piece of this work is being as precise about the middle, because the middle takes up the most space, and the middle moves you from one place to another. So a quick preview, these are your 10 systems. And as you'll see, this is what Karen Pittman, my boss, would call footnoting common sense. The goal here is you're going to look at it and you're going to say, oh yeah, that's right. But I want you to think about a moment when you've been in crisis or struggling. And one of those systems, just like body systems, my son has asthma. When his respiratory system is in distress, it doesn't just affect his breathing. Thank you, Kate. It doesn't just affect his breathing. It affects his heart rate. It affects his brain and his thinking. So if I'm not staying healthy, or if I'm struggling to work and stay focused, all the other things get set off. When I go into a new environment, it's going to call on a new level of one of these 10. They're the same across cultures. They're the same across the lifespan. So grown-ups in the room, young people in the room, they're the same 10 all the time. Every system, every setting, every stage. And so how do you build them? Those abilities are super broad. I can get and stay healthy. They're hard to measure, but you know, like practically when you're observing or working with people, or personally when they're not working well, right? We can just we know when they're not working well. But there are these specific skills and habits and attitudes, skill sets and mindsets that actually can be intentionally, preventatively, proactively incorporated into how we do business, that we can teach. They're kind of like sight words, a, at, the, in. You teach young kids the sight words so that no matter what they're reading, you don't know what they'll read moving forward, but if they've mastered that, you're giving them the best fighting chance. These are your best fighting chance skills and habits and attitudes. You'll see growth mindset is on there. So what we did once we identified that in the last 3 minutes of talking to you for this period of time is that we then wanted to figure out, so if this is what matters the most, how do you actually develop them? How do you actually have environments that are readiness rich? And so what we learned through, again, sort of copious amounts of research was that there are certain kinds of environments that young people need to be in, relationships that they have to be in, and experiences that they need, and time and space to process and practice and play. Again, the same across stages, the same across young people and groups. Just to pique your interest a little more, we did this amazing study this past summer where we learned that it's great. We want to see systems and settings that have all of these specific practices. Those all get bucketed under those 4 categories. But if young people can get all of those, no matter, our research would say, and our experience, no matter how many people and places it takes, they can still be ready. So if you can sit down with a young person and actually map out who in their life or where in their life the presence or absence of these practices are, and map them to these practices, then it doesn't matter that their family's jacked up. It doesn't matter that their schools are difficult. They might still be okay. So today, in the session later, we'll look at kind of what that means, and we'll really interrogate the research and be able to see how you can make readiness right, how you can get intentional, how you can start naming and using language that matters, so that we can do our work, so that it's not just about outcomes and time, but it's actually about changing the lives permanently for our young people and giving them space and room and power in that. You'll see the power pieces in what the practices are to be able to realize that themselves. And so with that, I don't know if I'm over or if I did it. I have 1 minute left. I'm done.